I am deathly allergic to cats, and we had no idea about this until after this event. My name is Dave Sledge, and I had a near-death experience when I was 8 years old. When I was 8 years old, I was sleeping over my aunt's house. My parents were having a night out, doing whatever it is that they were doing. My aunt and my uncle go to bed. So if I were to guess, maybe it was like 11, 12 o'clock at night. And my aunt had a cat. Now, she had a long-haired gray cat. This is very important. I was cuddling with this cat all night long. Now, I don't want to give any spoilers, but I am deathly allergic to cats, and we had no idea about this until after this event. I'm using this cat as a pillow. Literally, this was the most chilled out cat ever, because my experience with cats is every time you're in a 10-foot radius, they're swiping at your ankles, they're like vicious predators. Like, this was the most chilled out cat ever. And I'm cuddling with this cat all night, and I start using my inhaler, because what happens with cats make my respiratory system shut down entirely. To this day, I cannot go to certain friends' houses for even 20 minutes. And I understand I'm too close to the camera. Bear with me. This story is very important to me, so I'm just going to keep going. I'm starting to use my inhaler every 2 or 3 minutes because it's really not working anymore. But I remember it was late and I didn't want to wake anyone up. Now, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but literally, the reason that I had this near-death experience was because I waited so long to wake up my aunt, because I felt so bad at the thought of waking her up. That's just the God's honest truth. So over the course of now, maybe 2 hours, I keep using my inhaler and I run out of medicine. Now, it's already really not working. And at that point, I realized I have to wake her up. Now, keep in mind, by this point, I am suffering. Like, I was really afraid at this point. And I finally wake up my aunt. I felt so bad. I sneak into her room. I'm like tiptoeing into her room, even though I know I'm going to wake her up. And when I finally wake her up and tell her what's going on, I'm super soft-spoken. I felt so bad that I was waking her up. Granted, half the reason I was soft-spoken was because I literally could not breathe. I was actually dying by this point. She jumps into action, and the plan was, my grandparents live right up the road. They live right up the road, and my grandfather has an inhaler that has medicine in it. And I hate to say it, but I knew that his inhaler wasn't going to work. So I was really panicking at this point. And I remember being in her car, in the back seat, on the left-hand side. My head was leaning against the window. I couldn't even hold my head up anymore. I was dying. As a matter of fact, my hippocampus was clearly shutting down in the car, because the next couple minutes I don't remember, but I'll share what my family members told me from those next couple minutes. I remember being in the car, and I really hate to say this, but I said something that I regret. I said something that I am so glad did not end up being my last words. At the time, what I said was, why do all the bad things always happen to me? Now, I know it's super negative, but I'm a kid and I'm scared and I'm literally suffocating to death. By the way, this was awful. This was actually the worst thing that has ever happened to me in my life. I'm just being honest. And I said those words, which I am so thankful ended up not being my last words. Apparently, we get to my grandparents' house. They meet us outside in the front yard. There's like a horizontal sidewalk with grass behind it. And thank God there was grass behind it, because I would have cracked my head open. Because apparently, the story goes, I went to try to take a puff of his inhaler and turned blue in the face or whatever, and fell straight on my back. And from there, and by the way, in hindsight, I could only imagine what it must have been like for them. from their perspective seeing that and then having to call the ambulance and just watching me lay there. I could only honestly imagine. I would like for you guys to like understand, like this is very personal for me and the family members that were involved in this. From my perspective, I just remember being in the car and then all of a sudden I was surrounded by darkness but there was a light in the center. And at the time, it seemed like the light was coming towards me, but in hindsight, I was probably going towards it. It was almost like we were coming towards each other. And this light got bigger and bigger until the only darkness that I saw was only in my peripherals. And this light was accompanied by a sound. It was 2 audible notes that I hope I never forget. It was beautiful. It was, I would love to recreate it, but I'm not an opera singer, so I apologize. It was 2 audible notes. One was higher than the other. It wasn't a low note. It was just lower than the other. And it was beautiful. It was like an orchestra or a choir, something like this. And the next thing you know, I woke up immediately after hearing those 2 notes. I woke up in the hospital. I couldn't feel my body. People were panicking. I had no idea what was going on. There was a needle that I thought was stuck in my arm, but in hindsight, I think they were just panicking. They told my mother to say goodbye to me. And I am not one to fabricate, especially on something this serious. My mother herself told me that they told her to say goodbye to me because they were going to call time of death in 30 seconds. That is exactly what they told her. And I have no idea how I survived at all. I don't think anyone really knows how it was that I survived, but I think it goes without being said. I'm very aware that all of my time on this planet has been extra time. And this is how I live my life, but that's another story for another time. And the next thing I remember must have been hours later, once I finally came to a little bit more. And they were asking me questions. They were trying to figure out if my brain was working, because you have to understand, my heart was completely shut down for a very long time. My brain was completely shut down for a long time. Hence, we are calling time of death, say goodbye to your son. But after I came to, and they're starting to ask me questions because they want to know, am I a vegetable? Honestly, they're trying to figure out my cognitive state. And they asked me, how did you get to the hospital? And what I told them was that my mother carried me in her arms and walked me to the hospital. That is probably the best part of that story. Now, I don't know if that was something that I saw on the other side, that I said it to them. I have no idea. I might have just been out of it, to be fair. But that's what I told them, and that's hilarious. Anyway, you have to make light of a bad situation sometimes. That is probably the best part of this story. And that is my near-death experience. This is very personal to me. I understand this story was all over the place. This is exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing now. I have spent the last 22 years trying to figure out what is consciousness and what is actual reality. And I have a feeling it has a lot to do with this experience. So this is fundamentally what brings me here to you. Okay, this is how I found out I was allergic to cats.